20th October, the day in history. October 20th, a day when art rose from the sea, music met politics, and legends were born across centuries. From the dazzling sails of the Sydney Opera House to the cool swagger of Snoop Dogg. From Kamala Harris' rise to power to a general's dramatic return across the Pacific. This date hums with history's heartbeat. Every October 20th carries echoes of triumph, creativity, rebellion, and rebirth. So settle in, because what you're about to hear isn't just a list of dates. It is a symphony of human ambition. This is October 20th, the day the world dared to dream bigger. Let's dive in. Number 1. The opening of the Sydney Opera House, 1973. It's October 20th, 1973. The Sydney Harbour gleams under a crisp blue sky. Crowds gather along the waterfront. School children in white hats, tourists clutching cameras, locals with pride swelling in their chests. On this very day, the world would witness not just the opening of a building, but the unveiling of a dream. The Sydney Opera House, a structure so bold, so futuristic, that for years it seemed impossible to complete, finally opened its gleaming sails to the world. Queen Elizabeth II herself arrived to cut the ribbon, but even her royal presence couldn't outshine the silhouette rising behind her. A masterpiece born from one man's imagination, countless hands' labor, and decades of doubt. The year was 1973, but the story began 2 decades earlier, with a design competition and a dream that almost never came true. A dream drawn in lines and curves. In 1955, an international competition was announced to design a new performing arts center for Sydney. The world's greatest architects submitted their visions, and among them was a Danish architect, Jørn Utzon, relatively unknown at the time. Utzon's submission was unlike anything else. While most competitors offered safe, box-like theaters, his design looked like poetry in motion, a series of billowing white shells that seemed ready to take flight. Some judges didn't understand it. One even dismissed it outright as impossible to build. But fate, as it often does in great stories, intervened. One of the judges, the celebrated American architect Eero Saarinen, arrived late, flipped through the rejected designs, and stopped cold at Utzon's sketch. "This," he said, "is the winner." That moment changed everything. The struggle beneath the sails. Construction began in 1959. What followed was chaos, breathtaking creativity clashing with bureaucracy, politics, and engineering challenges no one had ever faced before. The roof, those iconic sails, were an enigma. Engineers couldn't figure out how to make them stand without collapsing. Years passed. Costs skyrocketed. The original budget was around $7 million. By the end, it would balloon to $102 million, a staggering figure at the time. The media mocked it, politicians debated it, and taxpayers fumed. Yet Utzon refused to compromise his vision. He believed architecture wasn't just about buildings, it was about emotion. He once said, "The architect's greatest achievement is to make something people will never forget." But even genius has limits when politics gets involved. In 1966, before the Opera House was even finished, Utzon resigned amid disputes with the government. Heartbroken and humiliated, he left Australia, never to return to see his masterpiece completed. The Opera House that opened in 1973 was, in some ways, unfinished, a magnificent shell completed by others. But its soul remained Utzon's. A crown of dreams. On October 20th, 1973, as Queen Elizabeth II declared the Sydney Opera House open, thousands erupted in applause. Fireworks painted the harbour sky. The sails, gleaming white against the blue, became a crown upon the water, symbolizing human imagination at its best. Inside, the first public performance echoed through the concert hall. Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, Ode to Joy. The notes reverberated across the harbor, almost as if paying tribute to every hand that had built this temple of art. Utzon watched it all from afar. In Denmark, the man who dreamed the Opera House didn't attend the ceremony. Yet somewhere in that moment, across oceans and silence, his spirit stood tall among the sails. The engineering that bent reality. The Opera House wasn't just art, it was a technological revolution. The roof's design came from a breakthrough that took years of experimentation. The sails were eventually discovered to fit perfectly into a sphere, meaning each segment could be constructed with consistent geometry. It was elegant, efficient, and beautiful. An architectural riddle solved not by compromise, but by patience and creativity. The structure contains more than 1 million tiles, imported from Sweden. Each sail was meticulously placed, forming a shimmering texture that glows under sunlight and moonlight alike. But it's not just the outside. Inside, the halls were engineered for acoustic perfection. Every note, every whisper carries with precision, as if the building itself listens. The symbolism beyond architecture. To Australians, the Sydney Opera House is more than a landmark. It's a statement. It marks the moment when Australia declared itself not just a continent, but a cultural power. Before its creation, Sydney was known for its harbour and beaches. Afterward, it became known for its art, its daring, and its global vision. Today, over 10 million people visit it each year, and more than 1,500 performances take place under its sails annually. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, joining the ranks of the Great Wall of China and the Pyramids of Giza. But what makes it truly timeless is emotion. The Opera House is a reminder that beauty often demands struggle. It's a story of failure, persistence, exile, and triumph, all sculpted into stone and shell. From rejection to reverence. When Jørn Utzon died in 2008, Australia mourned him like a national hero. From the impossible dream to an icon on every postcard, the Sydney Opera House stands as proof that art can outlive controversy. And sometimes the most turbulent beginnings create the most enduring legacies. Even today, architects study it not just for its form, but for its philosophy. Utzon's approach, blending nature, mathematics, and spirituality, paved the way for generations of visionaries who dared to think beyond the possible. If you were Jørn Utzon, if your greatest creation stood across the world, celebrated by millions, but you were never invited to see it, would you feel pride or pain? That is the paradox of genius. The beauty you give the world sometimes demands everything in return. Let me know what you think. Pride, pain, or both. Comment below. Today, those sails still rise over Sydney like frozen music. At dawn, they catch the first rays of sunlight. At night, they glow against the stars. Beneath them, laughter, song, and applause still fill the air. From the chaos of creation to the triumph of art, October 20th, 1973, remains the day the world looked across the water and saw what humanity could become. Number 2. The birth of Kamala Harris, a journey that changed American politics forever. Born October 20th, 1964. October 20th, 1964, a date etched in modern history. In the bustling city of Oakland, California, a baby girl was born who would one day rewrite the rules of politics, shatter ceilings once thought unbreakable, and become a living emblem of representation and resilience. Her name? Kamala Devi Harris. But Kamala's story isn't just about political triumph. It's about identity, heritage, and the unrelenting pursuit of justice. It's about what happens when two worlds, Indian and Jamaican, merge to create a leader who would one day stand at the very heart of American power. The roots of a trailblazer. Kamala Harris was born to Shamala Gopalan and Donald Harris, two brilliant minds who found each other through their shared passion for civil rights and education. Shamala, a biologist from India, came to the United States to pursue her doctoral studies at UC Berkeley. She was a woman far ahead of her time, determined, educated, and fiercely independent, leaving her home in Chennai at just 19 years old. Donald Harris, a Jamaican economist, came to Berkeley as well, driven by a desire to study economics and advocate for equity and social progress. Their love story wasn't just romantic, it was revolutionary. Together, they became active voices in the civil rights movement of the 1960s, often marching with leaders who dreamed of racial equality and justice. And so, when Kamala was born, her destiny was already intertwined with activism, courage, and diversity. Her childhood home wasn't ordinary. It was a hub of conversations about equality, freedom, and change. Her mother often told her, "You may be the first to do many things, but make sure you're not the last." That message became the heartbeat of Kamala's life. Growing up between worlds. Kamala's upbringing was a fusion of two rich cultures, Indian and Jamaican, set against the backdrop of an evolving America. She grew up attending a Black Baptist church and visiting Hindu temples, celebrating both Diwali and Christmas, and understanding from a young age that identity is not about choosing sides. It's about embracing every part of who you are. When her parents divorced, Kamala and her sister Maya were raised primarily by their mother. Kamala made sure her daughters understood their heritage and the value of resilience. She exposed them to Indian traditions while ensuring they were deeply connected to their African American roots. Living in Berkeley during the late 1960s and early 1970s, Kamala saw protest marches, witnessed systemic racism, and felt the urgency of reform all around her. Those moments weren't abstract lessons. They were real-life experiences shaping her vision of justice. When Kamala was 7, Kamala moved the family to Montreal, Canada, after accepting a research position there. It was a big change, but Kamala adapted quickly. She learned French, joined her school's debate club, and developed the confidence to speak up, even when she stood alone. This period taught her adaptability, courage, and independence, qualities that would later define her political career. Education and the power of advocacy. After finishing high school in Montreal, Kamala returned to the U.S. to attend Howard University in Washington, D.C., one of the most prestigious historically Black universities in America. At Howard, she majored in political science and economics and became deeply involved in campus politics. She joined the debate team, became a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, and interned as a mail clerk in the U.S. Senate. Howard shaped her into a woman who believed that leadership isn't about titles, it's about service. Those 4 years instilled in her the pride of Black excellence and the determination to represent those who are often overlooked. After Howard, she attended the University of California, Hastings College of the Law, where she earned her law degree. Her peers described her as focused, confident, and fearless, someone who never backed down from a tough argument. Rising through the ranks, Kamala began her career in the Alameda County District Attorney's Office, where she prosecuted cases involving sexual assault, drug trafficking, and violent crime. She wasn't just enforcing the law, she was fighting to make it fairer. In 2003, she made history by being elected District Attorney of San Francisco. Her win was no small feat. She became the first woman and the first Black person to hold the position. Her tenure was marked by reforms. She launched initiatives to help first-time offenders find jobs instead of facing jail time. And she stood firm against the death penalty, even when it wasn't politically popular. By 2010, Kamala Harris had her eyes on an even bigger stage. She ran for Attorney General of California. And despite the odds, she won, becoming the first woman, first African American, and first South Asian American to hold that position in California's history. She handled complex cases, from corporate fraud to environmental justice, always guided by her mother's lessons: be bold, be just, and never back down. The road to the U.S. Senate. In 2016, Kamala Harris was elected as the U.S. Senator from California, succeeding Barbara Boxer. In the Senate, her sharp questioning style and calm demeanor quickly made her a national figure. During hearings, she grilled top officials with precision and poise, a combination that drew praise from supporters and frustration from those unprepared for her intensity. Her work in the Senate focused on immigration reform, healthcare, environmental justice, and women's rights. Kamala often said, "A harm against one of us is a harm against all of us," echoing her lifelong belief in community over competition. The 2020 election. In August 2020, Joe Biden announced Kamala Harris as his running mate, marking a historic moment in U.S. politics. She became the first woman of color ever nominated for national office by a major party. That November, amid a global pandemic and deep national division, the Biden-Harris ticket won. When Kamala took the oath of office on January 20th, 2021, she became the first woman, first Black American, and first South Asian American to hold the office of Vice President of the United States. Her swearing in was more than a political victory. It was a moment of pride for millions around the world. From Indian villages to Jamaican communities to young girls everywhere, Kamala Harris became a living symbol of possibility. Beyond politics. Despite her historic role, Kamala continues to face scrutiny and challenges, something she acknowledges with grace and determination. She often says, "My mother used to say, don't complain about the things you can change. Go out there and do something about it." Beyond politics, Kamala's influence has expanded into culture and global representation. She's appeared on the cover of Time, Vogue, and numerous international publications. She's been celebrated as one of the world's most powerful women, yet she remains grounded in her values of empathy, equity, and service. Legacy and inspiration. Kamala Harris's journey is not just about breaking records, it's about breaking barriers. She represents the power of diversity, the beauty of heritage, and the promise that anyone, no matter their background, can rise to the highest levels of leadership. From a little girl watching her mother march for justice to standing as Vice President of the United States, Kamala's story reminds the world that progress is possible, but it takes courage, conviction, and compassion. Her life is a modern-day reflection of what it means to dream big, fight hard, and stay true to who you are. And so, on this day, October 20th, as we remember her birth, we don't just celebrate a leader. We celebrate a movement, one born from love, equality, and the belief that no ceiling is too high to shatter. Because Kamala Harris didn't just make history, she changed it. Number 3. The birth of Snoop Dogg. From Long Beach streets to global stardom, born October 20th, 1971. October 20th, 1971, the world didn't know it yet, but a star was born in the city of Long Beach, California. His name, Calvin Cortazar Broadus Jr., but the world would come to know him by a name that defines cool itself. Snoop Dogg. Laid-back voice, effortless flow, the king of West Coast vibes. Snoop didn't just make music, he created a lifestyle. From gangsta rap to reggae to gospel, from hip-hop to Hollywood, his journey is one of transformation, survival, and unstoppable charisma. So today, as we look back at October 20th, 1971, we celebrate not just a birthday, but the birth of an icon who changed music forever. Early life, growing up in Long Beach. Snoop Dogg was born in Long Beach, California, to Beverly Tate and Vernell Varnado, a Vietnam veteran and singer. Life in the neighborhood wasn't easy. It was tough, real, and filled with challenges that shaped his outlook on life. His mother nicknamed him Snoopy because of his love for the cartoon character from Peanuts, and the name stuck, eventually evolving into Snoop Dogg. As a child, Snoop sang in the local Golgotha Trinity Baptist Church and even played piano, something many fans never knew. But outside the church walls, life was more complicated. The streets of Long Beach were rough, filled with gang influence and survival struggles. Snoop often said those early years taught him two things: loyalty and hustle. He began rapping in 6th grade, using his music to escape the chaos around him. His voice, deep, smooth, and hypnotic, already stood out even back then. He wasn't just rapping for fun. It became his way of storytelling, expressing what life felt like in the world he grew up in. The hustle before fame. Before fame, Snoop's path wasn't easy. After high school, he got into minor troubles with the law, spending short stints in jail, a reality many young black men faced at that time in urban America. But music kept calling him back. He began recording homemade tapes with his cousin Nate Dogg and friend Warren G., who would later become part of the legendary Group 213, a reference to Long Beach AS area code. One day, Warren G. passed one of Snoop's mixtapes to his stepbrother, none other than Dr. Dre of NWA. That single moment changed everything. Dre was blown away by Snoop's voice, that laid-back, almost effortless flow that sounded like nothing else in rap at the time. Within days, Dre invited Snoop to audition, and soon, the two began working together. That partnership would redefine the entire sound of West Coast hip-hop. The rise, the Chronic, and global fame. In 1992, Dr. Dre released The Chronic, and with it, the world met Snoop Dogg. His feature on hits like Nuthin' But a G Thang and Let Me Ride made him an instant sensation. His smooth voice and calm delivery contrasted perfectly with Dre's beats. It was magic. The world had never heard rap sound so effortless, so melodic, yet so real. Then came 1993, Snoop's debut album, Doggy Style. It was a cultural earthquake. Released under Death Row Records, the album debuted at #1 on the Billboard charts and went quadruple platinum within a year. Tracks like Gin and Juice, Who Am I, What's My Name, and Murder Was the Case became anthems, not just of West Coast hip-hop, but of an entire generation. Snoop's persona, cool, unbothered, and playful, made him stand out in an era dominated by aggression and controversy. He wasn't just a rapper, he was a vibe. Trials, controversies, and transformation with fame came chaos. Snoop was charged with murder in connection with a fatal shooting that took place near his home. The case dragged on for years, capturing national attention. But in 1996, after a lengthy trial, Snoop was acquitted. The verdict changed the trajectory of his life. He started focusing more on his art, family, and legacy rather than the streets. His next albums, including The Dogfather, showed a more reflective Snoop, still slick but more mature. By the late 90s, his relationship with Death Row Records ended, and he joined No Limit Records, founded by Master P. It was a fresh start, one that allowed him to reinvent himself musically and personally. He evolved from a gangster rapper into a cultural icon, one that transcended music. Reinvention and the birth of a brand. Snoop Dogg wasn't content with being just a rapper. He became an entertainer, entrepreneur, and global personality. He starred in movies like Training Day, Soul Plane, and Starsky and Hutch, showing off his comedic side. He launched his own lines of cannabis, gin, and even cookbooks. Yes, Snoop Dogg the chef. His friendship with Martha Stewart became one of pop culture's most beloved duos. Together, they hosted Martha and Snoop's potluck dinner party, blending humor, food, and charm in a way no one expected. Then came his spiritual transformation. In 2012, Snoop embraced Rastafarianism and released a reggae album under the name Snoop Lion, titled Reincarnated. It was a bold step that showed his spiritual depth and desire for peace. He didn't stop there. He even released a gospel album, Bible of Love, in 2018, showing once again that Snoop can adapt, evolve, and inspire through every stage of life. Cultural impact and legacy. Snoop Dogg's influence on hip-hop and pop culture is impossible to measure. He introduced slang, popularized laid-back West Coast sound, and inspired generations of artists like Kendrick Lamar, Wiz Khalifa, and Nipsey Hussle. He's appeared on countless TV shows, performed at the Super Bowl halftime show, and collaborated with everyone from Eminem and Pharrell to Katy Perry and Dr. Dre beyond music. His advocacy for peace, youth mentorship, and social reform reflects the maturity of a man who has seen both the dark and bright sides of fame. And while he's known for his chill persona, behind the smoke and laughter is a businessman who owns Death Row Records today, a poetic full circle in hip-hop history. The icon lives on. Over the decades, Snoop has remained relevant, something few artists from the 90s can claim. His secret? Authenticity. He's never pretended to be someone he's not. Whether he's coaching youth football, streaming video games on Twitch, or performing for millions worldwide, Snoop stays true to himself. His story is one of evolution, from a kid in Long Beach to a global icon who changed how the world sees rap. In 2022, when Snoop performed at the Super Bowl LVI halftime show alongside Dr. Dre, Eminem, and Mary J. Blige, it was more than nostalgia. It was recognition. Recognition of a man who turned rhythm into revolution and rhyme into resilience. Legacy beyond music. Snoop Dogg isn't just a rapper. He's a storyteller, entrepreneur, and bridge between cultures and generations. He's been nominated for Grammy Awards, starred in documentaries, mentored young artists, and built an empire that includes everything from entertainment to philanthropy. He once said, "If it's flipping hamburgers at McDonald's, be the best hamburger flipper in the world. Whatever you do, You gotta master your craft. That mindset, dedication, humility, and hustle is exactly why Snoop's influence has lasted for over 3 decades. So today, on October 20th, we celebrate not just the birthday of a rap legend, but the birth of a global icon. Snoop Dogg's story isn't about fame or fortune. It is about transformation, from the streets of Long Beach to the top of the music world, from hardship to harmony, from Calvin Broadus Jr. to Snoop Dogg. And no matter how the world changes, one thing stays the same. Snoop will always be the definition of cool. Number 4, the birth of a legend. Mickey Mantle, born October 20th, 1931. October 20th, 1931. A quiet morning in Spavinaw, Oklahoma, a small town surrounded by dusty roads, open fields, and the hum of hard work. No one could have guessed that this little boy born on that autumn day would grow up to become one of the most iconic figures in baseball history. His name? Mickey Charles Mantle. To baseball fans, he wasn't just another athlete. He was the symbol of America's golden age of baseball. Power, grace, and grit wrapped in a single swing. This is the story of a man who turned raw talent into timeless legacy, who battled pain, fame, and expectation, and still became a legend. The boy from Oklahoma. Mickey Mantle's story starts in Spavinaw, a small Oklahoma town with barely 500 residents. His father, Elvin "Mutt" Mantle, worked in the mines but dreamed bigger for his son. Mutt was obsessed with baseball, especially the legends of his time like Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig, and he saw in young Mickey the potential to follow in their footsteps. From the time Mickey could walk, his father trained him, not just to play baseball, but to master it. Mutt taught Mickey to switch hit, meaning he could bat both left and right-handed, a rare skill that would later make him one of the most dangerous hitters in history. Every evening after long shifts underground, Mutt would pitch balls to Mickey under the dim glow of a porch light. It wasn't glamorous, but it was pure. Baseball wasn't just a game for the Mantles, it was a bond. But life wasn't easy. Poverty loomed, and tragedy struck early when Mickey's father and several uncles later died of Hodgkin's disease, a hereditary illness that haunted Mickey his entire life. Yet even in grief, his father's lessons stayed with him. Work hard, stay humble, swing big. The spark of greatness, high school to the minors. By the time Mickey reached high school, his talent was impossible to ignore. He played shortstop for the Commerce High School baseball team and quickly gained local fame. Scouts noticed not just his hitting power, but his lightning-fast speed and natural athleticism. In 1948, a New York Yankees scout named Tom Greenwade traveled to Oklahoma to see him play. After watching Mickey crush a baseball out of the park twice, Greenwade knew he was looking at something special. He signed Mickey Mantle to a Yankees contract for $2,500 and a $2,500 bonus, a small fortune for a teenager in post-war Oklahoma. Mantle joined the Independence Yankees, a minor league team in Kansas. But his early career wasn't smooth. He struggled with homesickness and self-doubt. A poor start made him question his future. He even considered quitting. It took a heartfelt letter from his father to pull him back on track. That letter reminded him who he was, where he came from, and what he was capable of. Mickey didn't quit, and baseball would never be the same again. The Yankee years begin. In 1951, Mantle made his major league debut with the New York Yankees. It was a team already rich with legends, including Joe DiMaggio, whose graceful dominance inspired millions. At first, Mantle struggled. The pressure of filling DiMaggio's shoes was immense. Critics called him raw, even overrated. But beneath the nerves was a player with something rare: natural, explosive power combined with blazing speed. By the time DiMaggio retired at the end of the 1951 season, the Yankees had found their next superstar. Mantle took over center field, and history began to write itself. From 1952 to 1968, Mickey Mantle ruled Yankee Stadium. He was a switch hitter who could send balls soaring over fences from either side of the plate. His home runs weren't just long, they were legendary. Fans talked about the tape measure shots, where Mantle's hits traveled over 500 feet, sometimes even leaving the stadium. One of his most famous blasts reportedly went 565 feet, a record still debated today. But more than the stats, It was his aura. The way he carried himself, humble yet confident, broken yet unbeatable, made him an American hero. Glory and pain. The battle with his own body. For all his glory, Mantle's career was a constant battle with injuries. In his rookie season, during the 1951 World Series, he tore ligaments in his knee while chasing a fly ball hit by Willie Mays. That single play would affect him for the rest of his life. Doctors told him he'd never be the same, but Mickey refused to slow down. He played through pain that would have sidelined most athletes. His resilience became the stuff of legend. Throughout the 1950s, Mantle was unstoppable. He led the league in home runs 4 times, RBIs once, and runs scored 6 times. In 1956, he won the Triple Crown, leading the league in batting average, 353, home runs, 52, and RBIs, a 130. That same year, he was named Most Valuable Player, MVP, the first of 3 times he'd win the award. He helped the Yankees capture 7 World Series championships, proving that he wasn't just talented, he was clutch. But while fans saw the hero on the field, they didn't see the pain he endured behind the scenes: multiple surgeries, chronic knee damage, and a growing dependence on alcohol. The price of greatness was heavy. The mantle, mystique, fame, flaws, and humanity. By the late 1950s, Mickey Mantle was one of America's most recognized faces. His charisma, southern charm, and boyish smile made him a favorite among fans and the press. Yet fame can be isolating. Mantle often struggled with self-doubt, guilt over his father's death, and the weight of being a national hero. He turned to alcohol, which began affecting his relationships and health. But even in his flaws, fans loved him more. Why? Because Mickey Mantle was real. He wasn't perfect, and that made him relatable. He once said, "If I knew I was going to live this long, I would have taken better care of myself." That quote became symbolic, a reflection of a man who gave everything to the game, even when his body couldn't take it. Despite personal battles, Mantle's legend only grew. He was the bridge between the old-school icons like Babe Ruth and modern stars like Hank Aaron. When he stepped up to bat, stadiums fell silent, waiting for magic. Legacy of greatness, records, and reverence. When Mickey Mantle retired in 1968, he left behind an extraordinary legacy. 536 career home runs, Triple Crown winner, 1956, 3-time MVP, 7-time World Series champion, 16-time All-Star. He finished with a lifetime batting average of .298 and an unmatched combination of speed, power, and determination. In 1974, he was inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame, a first-ballot selection. His number 7 was retired by the Yankees, forever enshrined among the greats. To this day, Yankee Stadium remains filled with Mantle jerseys and his famous quote, "During my 18 years, I came to bat almost 10,000 times. I struck out about 1,700 times, and I walked maybe 1,800 times. You figure a ball player will average about 500 at-bats a season. That means I played 7 years without ever hitting the ball." It wasn't humility. It was Mickey reminding everyone that greatness is built on failure, effort, and heart. The final innings, redemption and reflection. In his later years, Mantle faced the consequences of his lifestyle. Years of drinking took a toll on his liver. In 1995, he underwent a liver transplant but passed away shortly after, on August 13, 1995, at age 63. Before his death, he spoke candidly to fans, urging young people not to follow his mistakes. "Don't be like me," he said tearfully. "God gave me a body and an ability, and I wasted it." Those words weren't self-pity, they were wisdom. In his final years, Mickey Mantle became more than a baseball player. He became a teacher of life. He reconciled with his family, made peace with his past, and inspired millions through honesty and vulnerability. His funeral was attended by legends, fans, and fellow players who saw him as both hero and human. The immortal Mantle. Even decades after his passing, Mickey Mantle's legacy endures. His memorabilia sells for millions. His name still echoes in every conversation about baseball's greatest players. Statues, documentaries, songs, all celebrate the boy from Oklahoma who became the face of American sports. He wasn't perfect, but maybe that's why we love him. Because Mickey Mantle represented something deeply human, the beauty of imperfection wrapped in greatness. He didn't just play baseball, he gave it soul. And every October 20th, when fans remember his birthday, they don't just celebrate an athlete, they celebrate the heartbeat of an era. From a dusty field in Oklahoma to the bright lights of Yankee Stadium, Mickey Mantle's story reminds us that legends aren't born, they're built, inning by inning, swing by swing. He lived fast, hit hard, and left behind a legacy that still shines. On this day, October 20th, we remember not just the birth of a ball player, but the rise of a man who taught us what it means to chase greatness, no matter the odds. The name still echoes through the ages. Mickey Mantle, the Mick. Number 5, launching of RMS Olympic, 1910. On October 20th, 1910, the city of Belfast witnessed a breathtaking sight, the launch of the RMS Olympic, the magnificent sister ship of the ill-fated Titanic. Built by Harland and Wolff for the White Star Line, the Olympic was a true marvel of early 20th century shipbuilding, a blend of elegance, engineering mastery, and human ambition that captured the world's imagination. Before the world ever heard of the Titanic disaster, the Olympic was already a star, the first of the Olympic-class liners, setting new benchmarks in maritime luxury and safety. Its launch was not merely a technical achievement, it was a symbol of an era marked by rapid industrial growth, innovation, and the race among nations to dominate the seas. The birth of a giant. In the early 1900s, transatlantic travel was booming. Wealthy travelers sought speed and comfort, while immigrants looked for reliable transport across the ocean. The White Star Line, in competition with rival companies like Cunard, wanted ships that were not only large and luxurious, but also safe and dependable. Thus was born the idea of the Olympic-class trio, Olympic, Titanic, and Britannic. Designed by the brilliant Thomas Andrews and built at Harland and Wolff's shipyard in Belfast, the RMS Olympic became the pioneer. Construction began in December 1908, with over 15,000 workers toiling day and night. Every rivet, every plate, and every design curve reflected perfection. At 882 feet in length and weighing 45,324 tons, the Olympic was the largest moving object ever built by human hands at that time. When it was finally ready for launch, the world's eyes turned toward Belfast. Newspapers hailed it as the new queen of the ocean. The grand launch, October 20th, 1910. That crisp morning in Belfast carried an electric energy. Crowds gathered along the harbor, dignitaries lined the platform, and the shipyard workers who had poured their sweat into its creation stood proud. At 11:09 a.m., the signal was given. The great ship, resting on greased wooden slipways, began its slow, majestic slide into the River Lagan. There was no champagne bottle smashed against its bow. That was not the tradition for Harland and Wolff launches. Instead, there was respectful silence, broken only by the thunderous cheers as the hull met the water with an immense splash. For those who watched, it was more than a ship. It was the embodiment of human progress, a floating cathedral of steel and ambition. A floating palace. Once launched, the RMS Olympic entered its final fitting-out stage, where the interior was transformed into a world of opulence. The design mirrored the grandeur of Edwardian luxury, rivaling the finest hotels of London or Paris. There were sweeping staircases, crystal chandeliers, and ornate wood paneling. The first-class dining saloon could seat over 500 guests, while the promenade deck stretched endlessly, allowing passengers to stroll as they admired the sea. Olympic featured 4 towering funnels, though only 3 were functional. The 4th was added purely for aesthetic symmetry. Its power came from 29 boilers feeding steam engines that could propel the liner at 21 knots, a respectable speed for such a massive vessel. But what truly made the Olympic shine was its reputation for stability and comfort. Early passengers often remarked that even in rough seas, the ship moved with graceful calm, earning it the nickname Old Reliable. The first voyage. The RMS Olympic set sail on her maiden voyage on June 14, 1911, from Southampton to New York under the command of Captain Edward J. Smith, the same man who would later helm the Titanic. Everything about the voyage screamed success. The ship impressed both passengers and press alike. Its smooth handling, impeccable service, and sense of grandeur made it an instant favorite among the elite. One traveler described it as a hotel that floats, yet moves with the dignity of a cathedral. For the White Star Line, the Olympic's success was a triumph. It reinforced the belief that their strategy of luxury over speed had paid off. The Titanic connection. When people hear Olympic class, their thoughts immediately drift toward the Titanic, the ship that never completed its maiden voyage. But before tragedy struck in 1912, the Olympic was already proving the soundness of her design. In fact, after the Titanic disaster, many passengers expressed their trust in the Olympic, believing it was safer because of improvements made to its lifeboat arrangements and watertight compartments. Following the tragedy, Olympic underwent major safety upgrades, including double hull plating and additional lifeboats, ensuring that history would not repeat itself. Interestingly, due to their striking resemblance, rumors persisted for decades that the Olympic and Titanic had been swapped as part of an insurance scheme, a theory long debunked, but one that still fascinates conspiracy enthusiasts today. Life during the war. When World War I broke out in 1914, the RMS Olympic's days as a peaceful luxury liner came to an abrupt halt. The British Admiralty requisitioned the ship and converted it into a troop transport vessel. Its elegant interiors were stripped of luxury fittings, replaced by bunks and mess halls. Renamed HMT Olympic, it carried thousands of soldiers across the Atlantic to battlefronts in Europe and the Middle East. Despite the dangers of wartime service, the Olympic gained legendary status. On one occasion in 1918, it even rammed and sank a German submarine, U-103, a remarkable feat for a passenger liner. This act earned Olympic the affectionate nickname Old Reliable, symbolizing strength and endurance in an era of turmoil. Return to civilian service. After the war, the Olympic returned to Harland and Wolff for extensive refitting. The ship was restored to its former luxury but also updated for the modern age. It received new engines, improved safety systems, and refurbished interiors. In 1920, it re-entered service as a peacetime ocean liner, once again carrying passengers between Southampton, Cherbourg, and New York. The Olympic continued to attract attention and admiration, a living relic of an age before tragedy and war changed the world. For over a decade, the Olympic remained a favorite among travelers. It was popular not just for its comfort, but also for the romantic aura surrounding its history. The ship that survived while its sisters, Titanic and Britannic, met tragic fates, the beginning of the end. By the late 1920s, aviation and newer, faster ships began to dominate the transatlantic route. Despite upgrades, the Olympic was starting to show its age. On May 15, 1934, tragedy struck when Olympic collided with the Nantucket lightship, killing 7 of its 11 crew. Though the ship was repaired, it was clear that its glory days were fading. By 1935, the decision was made to retire the once mighty vessel. The ship was sold for scrap, and by 1937, dismantling was complete. Some of its luxurious fittings, like paneling, mirrors, and furniture, were auctioned off and reused in hotels and restaurants across Britain. Even today, fragments of Olympic's grandeur live on in places like the White Swan Hotel in Alnwick, which still displays parts of its original interior. Legacy of the Olympic. The RMS Olympic may not have achieved the same tragic fame as the Titanic, but her story is one of resilience, beauty, and endurance. She served with distinction for over 24 years, carrying millions of passengers safely across the Atlantic and through a world war. To maritime historians, Olympic represents the pinnacle of pre-war ocean liner design, the perfect blend of strength, grace, and innovation. In a sense, Olympic's survival preserved the legacy of her entire class. Without her, our understanding of the Titanic's structure and design might have been lost entirely. Even today, enthusiasts and historians continue to celebrate the Olympic through documentaries, museum exhibits, and restored artifacts. For many, she remains the ship that carried the spirit of the Titanic, but lived to tell the tale. A symbol of human aspiration. The launch of the RMS Olympic on October 20, 1910, stands as one of the most remarkable chapters in maritime history. It was not merely about a ship entering the water. It was about the triumph of human imagination, craftsmanship, and willpower. From her majestic launch in Belfast to her final voyage, Olympic's story reminds us of a time when the sea was both a mystery and a promise. When people believed that through innovation, they could master even the mightiest of forces. She was more than a vessel of steel. She was a vessel of dreams. And though she no longer sails the oceans, her spirit continues to glide through history, steady, proud, and old reliable to the very end. Number 6. MacArthur returns to the Philippines. WWII 1944. October 20th, 1944, a humid, windswept morning on the eastern shores of Leyte Island, Philippines. Waves crashed against the sand as American landing crafts pushed toward the beach, engines roaring, shells bursting in the distance. Standing aboard one of those boats was a man whose name had already become legend, General Douglas MacArthur. Tall, stern, wearing his signature cap and aviator sunglasses, he was about to fulfill a promise that had burned in his heart for more than 2 years. That morning, history would witness not just a military operation, but a symbolic act of redemption and defiance, the dramatic moment when MacArthur returned to the Philippines, keeping his famous vow, "I shall return." The promise that shook the Pacific. To truly understand the emotion and magnitude of that day, we must step back to March 1942, in the darkest days of World War II. The Japanese Empire had swept across the Pacific, capturing territory after territory. The Philippines, then an American Commonwealth, became a fierce battleground. American and Filipino forces, under MacArthur's command, fought bravely on the Bataan Peninsula and Corregidor Island. But after months of relentless siege, starvation, and disease, defeat was inevitable. Under orders from President Roosevelt, MacArthur was forced to leave. On a torpedo boat in the middle of the night, he escaped with his family and staff to Australia. The departure weighed heavily on him. As he reached safety, reporters gathered around, anxious for a statement. MacArthur's voice was steady, but his words were thunderous. "I came through, and I shall return." Those 4 words became a battle cry for millions of Filipinos suffering under Japanese occupation and for Allied troops fighting across the Pacific. They weren't just a personal promise. They became a symbol of hope, resistance, and honor. The long road back. After his escape, MacArthur became the supreme commander of Allied forces in the Southwest Pacific area. From Australia, he meticulously planned his counteroffensive. Every island captured, every battle fought, from New Guinea to the Solomon Islands, was one step closer to the Philippines. MacArthur's strategy was bold yet methodical. He believed that retaking the Philippines was not just a military necessity but a moral obligation. The islands were a former U.S. territory, home to millions who had pledged loyalty to the American flag. For him, leaving them behind was unthinkable. By mid-1944, after victories in New Guinea and the Marianas, the stage was finally set. Japan's naval power was weakening, and American forces were ready to strike. The target, Leyte Island, chosen for its central position and airfield potential. Operation King II, the code name for the invasion of Leyte, was about to begin. The return to Leyte. At dawn on October 20th, 1944, under a cloudy sky, American forces launched one of the largest amphibious invasions of the Pacific War. More than 700 ships, including battleships, destroyers, and transports, assembled in Leyte Gulf. As naval guns pounded Japanese defenses, landing crafts filled with soldiers began to move toward the beaches. General MacArthur was on board the command ship USS Nashville, watching intently. Hours later, as resistance weakened, the first waves of U.S. troops reached the shore. The moment had come. MacArthur ordered a landing craft for himself, his staff, and Philippine President Sergio Osmeña. As the boat neared the beach, waves crashed violently, soaking everyone aboard. But MacArthur, ever the showman and leader, was undeterred. In front of cameras and soldiers alike, he stepped into the surf, wading knee-deep through the water toward the sand. His khaki trousers were drenched, his cap firm on his head, and his stride was unflinching. It was more than an arrival. It was a cinematic moment etched into history. The image of MacArthur wading ashore became one of the most iconic photographs of World War II, symbolizing determination, resilience, and the fulfillment of a sacred promise. The famous speech. Shortly after landing, MacArthur set up a temporary headquarters at Red Beach, Leyte, and addressed the Filipino people through a live radio broadcast. His voice carried across the Pacific, confident, proud, and resolute. "People of the Philippines, I have returned. By the grace of Almighty God, our forces stand again on Philippine soil, soil consecrated in the blood of our two peoples. The hour of your redemption is here." The speech electrified not just the Philippines, but the entire Allied world. For the Filipino people, it was a declaration of liberation. For American soldiers, it was the sign that the tide of war was truly turning. The battle for Leyte. But MacArthur's return was only the beginning of a fierce and bloody campaign. The Japanese were determined not to give up the Philippines without a fight. Within days of the landing, intense battles erupted across the island. The Battle of Leyte Gulf, fought from October 23 to 26, 1944, became the largest naval battle in world history, involving more than 200,000 naval personnel and over 400 ships. Japan deployed almost every available ship, including Yamato and Musashi, two of the most powerful battleships ever built. But despite their might, American naval and air superiority overwhelmed them. The victory at Leyte Gulf effectively crippled the Japanese Navy, marking a turning point in the Pacific War. On land, however, the fighting continued for months. The terrain was harsh. Dense jungles, swamps, and mountains made progress slow and deadly. Yet the Allied troops pushed forward, supported by brave Filipino guerrillas who had been resisting the Japanese occupation for years. By December 1944, Leyte was finally secured. The door to the liberation of the entire Philippine archipelago was open. The symbolism of MacArthur's return. For historians, MacArthur's return was not just a military maneuver. It was a theatrical masterpiece of leadership. MacArthur understood the power of symbolism. He knew that morale could win battles as surely as weapons. When he walked ashore that day, every movement was deliberate. He didn't step out onto a pier or wait for calm seas. He chose to wade through the surf, to stand beside his soldiers, to be seen fulfilling his oath with action. That image, the general in his cap, sunglasses, and soaked uniform, became one of the defining photographs of the 20th century. It graced newspapers, magazines, and history books for decades to come. The emotional reunion. For the people of the Philippines, MacArthur's return was deeply personal. They had endured over 2 years of brutal occupation, torture, executions, starvation, and forced labor under Japanese control. When MacArthur's forces liberated town after town, Filipinos cheered, wept, and knelt in gratitude. Many still remember the stories told by their parents and grandparents, how the sight of American soldiers brought tears and hope after years of suffering. Even today, in Philippine schools and ceremonies, MacArthur's return is remembered as a moment of deliverance and national pride. Statues and memorials stand across the islands, especially at Leyte Landing Memorial Park, where bronze figures depict that iconic wade through the surf. MacArthur's legacy. After Leyte, MacArthur continued his campaign through Luzon and Manila, which was liberated in early 1945. He was hailed as a hero not only in America, but also in the Philippines, where he was regarded as a liberator and savior. When Japan finally surrendered in August 1945, MacArthur was chosen to accept Japan's official surrender aboard the USS Missouri, a moment that symbolically closed the circle of his promise. But his connection to the Philippines didn't end there. In later years, he served as Supreme Commander of Allied powers in Japan, overseeing its reconstruction, yet he always referred to the Philippines as his second home. In fact, in 1961, a monument was erected in Palo, Leyte, featuring life-sized bronze statues of MacArthur and his men walking through the water, a timeless tribute to one of the greatest homecomings in history. Behind the scenes, the cinematic angle. Interestingly, MacArthur was very aware of the media's power. The famous footage of his return was carefully coordinated by General Richard K. Sutherland and U.S. Army Signal Corps photographers. Some critics have suggested the scene was partially reenacted to ensure perfect shots for the press. Whether true or not, the moment transcended its logistics. It became one of the most cinematic real-life moments of World War II. Even Hollywood couldn't have scripted it better. The stormy beach, the defiant general, the fulfillment of a promise whispered in exile. It was leadership dramatized, and it worked. Why it still matters. 80 years later, the image of MacArthur's return still resonates. It speaks to more than war. It speaks to human perseverance. It's about promises kept, hope restored, and the courage to return when the world says you can't. For military historians, it remains a case study in strategic planning and leadership under adversity. For others, it is an emotional reminder of how one man's words can inspire a nation to endure. The Philippines, now an independent and thriving nation, continues to honor that day every October 20th. Ceremonies, reenactments, and wreath-laying events remind the world of the moment when a vow made in despair was fulfilled in glory. The man, the moment, and the message. When Douglas MacArthur walked through that surf on Ladies Beach, he wasn't just returning to a battlefield. He was returning to a promise made to millions. He was returning to the soldiers who died believing in his word. He was returning to the islands that had waited under occupation. He was returning to a dream, the dream of freedom, honor, and redemption. In his own words, spoken after the war, "No man is entitled to the blessings of freedom unless he be vigilant in its preservation." That's what his return symbolized. Not just victory, but vigilance, loyalty, and faith. On October 20th, 1944, as the waves lapped against Ladies' shores, MacArthur's boots pressed into the sand of destiny. History stood still for a moment, capturing a man fulfilling his word against all odds. It wasn't just a return to land, it was a return to belief. The belief that courage and conviction can turn defeat into triumph. And even today, when we see that photograph, that determined walk through the Philippine surf, it reminds us of the power of a promise kept. A single sentence, "I shall return," became one of the greatest testaments to resilience in human history. Number 7. Watergate, the Saturday Night Massacre, 1973. It was the night America's faith in its own government cracked. The date, October 20th, 1973. The event, what history would come to call the Saturday Night Massacre. On that autumn evening, in the thick of the Watergate scandal, the United States witnessed one of the most shocking confrontations between presidential power and the rule of law. What unfolded wasn't fought on a battlefield. It played out in the Oval Office, in hushed phone calls, in resignation letters sliding across desks. That night, the American presidency trembled and democracy was forced to ask itself, how much power is too much power? The shadows of Watergate. To understand why that night mattered so deeply, we have to go back to the summer of 1972. It began quietly, just another night in Washington, D.C. 5 men were arrested for breaking into the headquarters of the Democratic National Committee inside the Watergate complex. At first, the story seemed minor, almost absurd. A burglary, political espionage maybe, nothing more. But as journalists from the Washington Post, Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, began digging, threads of the story unraveled. Each thread led higher, deeper, darker. They discovered money trails linked to President Richard Nixon's re-election campaign, secret recordings, acts of sabotage. The White House itself had orchestrated a massive illegal political spying operation. Nixon, desperate to protect his presidency, did everything to contain the fallout. He denied involvement, deflected questions, and doubled down on secrecy. But the walls were closing in. By 1973, a special prosecutor, Archibald Cox, had been appointed to investigate. The Senate held televised hearings. America was watching. The tapes, Nixon's secret weapon, and his doom. Here's where the story took its fateful turn. During the investigation, it came to light that President Nixon had secretly recorded every conversation in the Oval Office. Every whisper, every plan, every confession. Those tapes could prove whether Nixon had indeed ordered a cover-up. or if he was telling the truth. Archibald Cox, the special prosecutor, demanded them. Nixon refused, citing executive privilege. The nation held its breath. This wasn't just about tapes anymore. It was about truth versus power. If the president could hide behind privilege, then no law, no constitution, could hold him accountable. Cox refused to back down. Nixon, angry and cornered, decided to end the standoff in a way that stunned even his closest advisors. The night begins. Saturday, October 20th, 1973. The sun dipped behind the White House. The Capitol was quiet, but inside, pressure was about to explode. At 8:09 p.m., President Nixon called Attorney General Elliot Richardson into the Oval Office. His command was simple but shocking: fire Archibald Cox. Richardson, a man of principle, was appalled. He had promised Congress that the special prosecutor would be independent, that politics would not interfere with justice. Richardson looked Nixon in the eye and refused. He didn't argue, didn't delay. Instead, he resigned on the spot. Minutes later, Nixon summoned Deputy Attorney General William Ruckelshaus. Same order, same answer. Ruckelshaus also refused, and he too resigned. Two of the most powerful men in the Justice Department had just walked out rather than obey what they saw as an unlawful order. But Nixon wasn't done. The massacre. With Richardson and Ruckelshaus gone, the next in line was Solicitor General Robert Bork, a man who would later become a controversial Supreme Court nominee. When Nixon gave the same order, Bork hesitated. He was torn between loyalty and legality. After a tense pause, he complied. That night, Bork called Archibald Cox and informed him he was dismissed. Moments later, FBI agents sealed off Cox's offices, removing files, changing locks, and cutting off access. The news spread like wildfire. Phones rang in newsrooms, typewriters clattered, and television anchors interrupted programs. America watched in disbelief as the President of the United States had fired the man investigating him and forced out the two top justice officials who stood in his way. The Washington Post headline the next morning said it all: Nixon fires Cox, Richardson, Ruckelshaus quit. But the nation already had a name for it: the Saturday Night Massacre. Public shock and outrage. Within hours, the reaction was volcanic. Congress was inundated with telegrams and letters demanding Nixon's impeachment. Protesters flooded the streets outside the White House, chanting for his resignation. Editorials accused the president of behaving like a monarch, not a public servant. Even Republican lawmakers began to distance themselves. The question was no longer if Nixon had abused power, but how much further he would go to keep it. One senator, Edward Brooke, said bluntly, "The president has put himself above the law." The term constitutional crisis wasn't just a phrase. It was reality. For the first time in U.S. history, the presidency itself stood accused of sabotaging the justice system. Inside the White House, behind closed doors, Nixon tried to project control, but he was shaken. His aides described him pacing, muttering, slamming phones down in anger. He believed Cox had forced his hand, that he was defending the presidency, not attacking it. Yet deep down, Nixon knew this was a fatal blow. His plan to silence the investigation had backfired spectacularly. Instead of saving his presidency, he had lit a firestorm that would consume it. The media dubbed it Nixon's night of destruction. But the truth was more psychological. It was Nixon's night of unraveling. The paranoia that had haunted his administration, the secrecy, the obsession with enemies, had finally turned inward. Congress moves in. Within days, Congress launched a full-scale inquiry. The House Judiciary Committee began exploring whether Nixon's actions constituted grounds for impeachment. The Justice Department appointed a new special prosecutor, Leon Jaworski, who made one thing clear: he would not stop the investigation. Meanwhile, the courts rejected Nixon's claims of privilege, ordering him to hand over the tapes. Each legal battle tightened the noose. Each day brought new revelations of deceit, spying, and abuse of power. By the summer of 1974, the Supreme Court unanimously ruled that Nixon must release the tapes. When he did, the world heard the evidence that sealed his fate: the smoking gun conversation, where Nixon ordered his aides to obstruct the FBI's investigation. The fall of a president. The night of the Saturday Night Massacre marked the beginning of the end. Less than a year later, on August 8, 1974, Richard Nixon announced his resignation, the first and only U.S. president to do so. In his televised address, Nixon's voice cracked with resignation. "I have never been a quitter, but as president, I must put the interests of America first." He walked away from the Oval Office the next morning, boarded Marine One, and flew into exile, the symbol of unchecked power brought low by accountability. The meaning behind the massacre. The Saturday Night Massacre wasn't just a political drama. It was a constitutional test of endurance. For the first time, America proved that no one, not even the president, stands above the law. The Justice Department's resignations became legendary acts of integrity. Elliot Richardson's refusal is still taught in law schools as a model of moral courage. The system held, the Constitution held, and the nation learned that democracy, though fragile, can defend itself when tested. The human story. But beyond the politics, there's a human story here, one of ego, loyalty, and fear. Richard Nixon wasn't a cartoon villain. He was brilliant, complex, deeply insecure. His entire career was built on ambition and the need for control. The Watergate tapes revealed not just crimes, they revealed the psychology of a man haunted by enemies, real and imagined. When Nixon ordered the Saturday Night Massacre, he wasn't only firing a prosecutor, he was fighting ghosts. Ghosts of betrayal, of political loss, of the belief that everyone was out to destroy him. That fear led him to destroy himself. Legacy and reflection. 50 years later, the phrase Saturday Night Massacre still echoes through history whenever a leader overreaches or challenges the boundaries of justice. It's been referenced during modern political crises, government firings, and investigations. The comparison remains powerful, a warning from the past. What happened on October 20th, 1973, was not just about politics. It was a stress test of democracy. And democracy passed, barely. As the clock struck midnight in Washington that night, the air was thick with tension and disbelief. The Justice Department was in chaos, the president's credibility in ruins. But in that chaos, something extraordinary survived: the rule of law. From the ashes of that political firestorm rose a new understanding. America could withstand even the most dangerous storms of its own making. So when we look back at that fateful night, we don't just remember Nixon as fall. We remember the courage of those who refused to bow, the strength of a system designed to hold even its most powerful accountable. Because that night, the Saturday Night Massacre, was not the death of democracy, it was its proving ground. Number 8. Birth of Viggo Mortensen, 1958. The late 1950s were a time of cultural rebirth. The world was recovering from the shadows of war. Jazz was shaping modern rhythm, and art, poetry, and cinema were finding their new voices. Then came October 20th, 1958, a quiet date on the calendar, yet one that would, unknowingly, give birth to a man who would later embody courage, artistry, and humanity on screen and beyond. That man was Viggo Peter Mortensen, born in New York City, to an American mother and a Danish father. Few could have predicted that this child, moving between continents and cultures, would one day become one of Hollywood's most respected actors, a poet, painter, musician, photographer, and polyglot, whose presence in cinema redefined authenticity and emotional depth. His birth wasn't the kind of moment that made newspaper headlines, but as history often teaches us, greatness rarely announces itself at birth. It grows quietly, nurtured by curiosity, struggle, and purpose, all qualities that Viggo Mortensen would embody throughout his life. A global childhood, roots without borders. Viggo's early years were far from ordinary. His father, a Danish farmer turned businessman, and his mother, an American of mixed heritage, moved frequently for work. Viggo spent parts of his childhood in Venezuela, Argentina, and Denmark, absorbing languages and cultures like a sponge. By the age of 10, he spoke fluent English, Spanish, and Danish. This multilingual upbringing shaped his worldview and, later, his acting, making him one of the few Hollywood figures who could seamlessly blend into any cultural backdrop. When his parents divorced, Viggo returned to New York, where he attended high school and later studied political science at St. Lawrence University. He was introspective, artistic, and restless, drawn to poetry and painting long before fame found him. This international, nomadic beginning would later become a hallmark of his identity, a citizen of the world who never quite belonged to one place, yet found belonging everywhere he went. The struggling actor. From stage to screen. After graduating, Viggo pursued acting, training under Warren Robertson in New York City. The early years were difficult, filled with rejection, small roles, and long nights wondering if art would ever pay the bills. His first film appearance was a small part in Witness, 1985, alongside Harrison Ford. The scene was brief, but his subtle intensity caught attention. Roles followed, some in thrillers, some in dramas, yet none brought him real recognition. But Viggo was never one to chase fame. He treated acting as an extension of his inner life, a way to explore emotion, truth, and humanity. This dedication to craft would eventually lead him to the role that changed everything. The breakthrough, becoming Aragorn. The year was 1999, and director Peter Jackson was casting for his monumental adaptation of J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings. Initially, the role of Aragorn, the noble ranger and reluctant king, was offered to another actor. But when that actor dropped out just days before filming, Jackson reached out to Viggo Mortensen. He almost said no. At the time, Viggo was a single father, deeply devoted to his son, Henry. He had never read Tolkien's books and felt uncertain about diving into such a massive production. But it was Henry, a fan of The Lord of the Rings, who convinced him to take the role. That decision would change cinematic history. Aragorn, the reluctant king who defined a generation. From the moment Viggo appeared on screen as Aragorn, audiences were captivated. There was something raw and magnetic in his performance, a blend of strength, humility, and melancholy that felt utterly real. Unlike many fantasy heroes, Aragorn wasn't loud or flamboyant. He was thoughtful, burdened, and quietly powerful, a man torn between doubt and destiny. And Viggo played him not as a mythical figure, but as a human being. He performed many of his own stunts, wielded real swords, and insisted on using practical props rather than stand-ins. Off-camera, he lived and breathed the role, sharpening his skills in horseback riding, sword fighting, and even forging his own weapons. He became so immersed in Middle-earth that castmates called him Aragorn, even off-set. After filming, he famously bought his horse, Urias, as a keepsake, not as a trophy, but as a tribute to the bond they'd formed. The trilogy's success made Viggo Mortensen an international star. But unlike many who ride fame's wave, he kept his feet firmly on the ground. Beyond Middle-earth, the artist emerges. After The Lord of the Rings, Viggo could have easily coasted on blockbuster fame. Instead, he chose projects that challenged convention and revealed his depth as an actor. He collaborated repeatedly with director David Cronenberg, delivering unforgettable performances in A History of Violence, 2005, Eastern Promises, 2007, and A Dangerous Method, 2011. In Eastern Promises, his portrayal of a Russian mob driver earned him an Academy Award nomination. Critics praised his quiet intensity, his ability to convey oceans of emotion with a glance. It was artistry stripped of vanity, storytelling in its purest form. And then came Green Book, 2018, where Viggo played Tony Lip, a working-class Italian-American who becomes the driver for black pianist Don Shirley during the segregation-era South. The film won Best Picture at the Oscars, and Viggo once again proved his ability to inhabit characters of every stripe: flawed, funny, deeply human, the multidimensional creator. But Viggo Mortensen is not just an actor. He's a poet, painter, photographer, and musician, a true Renaissance soul. He has published books of poetry and photography, showcasing his introspective and abstract worldview. His paintings, often bold and emotional, have been displayed in galleries around the world. He's released music albums that blend experimental soundscapes with spoken word, often collaborating with avant-garde artists. His publishing company, Percival Press, supports independent writers and artists, giving voice to underrepresented talent. This commitment to art, outside the glitz of Hollywood, reflects his deep respect for creativity as a form of truth. The private man behind the fame. Despite global recognition, Viggo Mortensen remains famously private. He avoids tabloids, social media, and red carpet spectacle. When he speaks in interviews, his tone is thoughtful, philosophical, sometimes even shy. He's fluent in multiple languages and often conducts interviews in the native language of the interviewer, switching between English, Spanish, French, or Danish without hesitation. He travels light, drives an old truck, and still carries a camera wherever he goes. Fame never owned him. Art did, a symbol of timeless masculinity. In an age of instant fame and overexposure, Viggo Mortensen's quiet confidence feels almost old-fashioned, but that's precisely what makes him timeless. He represents a kind of masculinity rooted not in dominance, but in empathy, intelligence, and self-awareness. As Aragorn, as Tony Lip, as countless others, he shows that strength can coexist with tenderness, and heroism can live in quiet actions. That's why audiences of all ages continue to connect with him. Whether as a medieval king or a modern man, his performances reflect something deeply human: the yearning to do right, to stay true, to belong. Global influence and cultural resonance. Across continents, Viggo Mortensen is admired not just as an actor but as a global thinker. In Denmark, he is celebrated as one of their own, a native son who carried Nordic stoicism into the world stage. In Latin America, he's beloved for his fluency and his respect for Hispanic culture. In America, he is viewed as an artist who embodies both courage and humility, someone who shows that Hollywood can still produce thinkers, not just celebrities. And in the eyes of millions of Lord of the Rings fans, he'll forever be Aragorn, the ranger who became a king, the leader who never sought a crown, the man who walked through fire for love and loyalty. Legacy and the man still becoming. Even now, decades after his debut, Viggo Mortensen continues to evolve. He's directed films like Falling, 2020, an intimate drama about family and forgiveness, inspired by his own life experiences. Critics hailed it as quietly devastating, a reflection of his unshakable authenticity. He's in his 60s now, but there's no sense of slowing down. Instead, his art keeps expanding in new films, new exhibitions, and new languages. And perhaps that's what defines him most: the refusal to stand still. He's not interested in being remembered as a Hollywood legend. He's interested in creating something honest every single day. So when we look back at October 20th, 1958, we see more than just a birthday. We see the beginning of a story that would inspire millions, a man who blurred the lines between art and life, performance and truth. From a multilingual child in Argentina to the king of Middle-earth, Viggo Mortensen's journey is proof that greatness doesn't shout, it whispers. It grows quietly, shaped by patience, passion, and purpose. And somewhere, behind that calm voice and piercing gaze, lies a truth every artist dreams of discovering: that real power comes not from fame or fortune, but from living life as an act of art itself. Number 9. Birth of John Krasinski, 1979. It's October 20th, 1979. The disco era is fading, the world is shifting into the age of modern pop culture, and America's entertainment landscape is on the brink of transformation. Somewhere in a quiet corner of Newton, Massachusetts, a baby boy is born, unaware that he'll grow up to become one of Hollywood's most beloved storytellers, bridging the worlds of comedy, drama, and modern heroism. That baby was John Burke Krasinski, born to Mary Claire, a nurse, and Ronald Krasinski, an internist. From the very beginning, John's life would be guided by empathy, wit, and a deep curiosity about people, traits that would later define his storytelling, both in front of and behind the camera. Today, when we say the name John Krasinski, it evokes images of The Office's Jim Halpert with his charming smirk, or the intense tactical mind of Jack Ryan. But beyond the roles, Krasinski represents something more profound, the modern evolution of the everyman hero. A Massachusetts childhood and early dreams. Growing up in a middle-class Polish-American family, John's early life was grounded and relatable. His parents valued education and humility, raising their three sons with a sense of compassion and humor that would become John's signature. He attended Newton South High School, where he was an active, witty, and outgoing student. But like most great stories, his beginnings were humble. At 17, Krasinski landed his first big performing experience in a school production of Annie, where he played Daddy Warbucks. It wasn't just the applause that hooked him, it was the storytelling, the magic of connecting with people, of stepping into someone else's shoes and making the audience feel something real. After high school, he attended Brown University, majoring in English literature with an interest in playwriting. He also studied at the National Theatre Institute in Connecticut, sharpening his craft. It wasn't fame that motivated him, it was the craft. Even then, Krasinski wasn't chasing stardom. He was quietly building a foundation for something greater: authenticity. New York hustle, from bartender to breakthrough. Like countless aspiring actors, John moved to New York City after college, juggling odd jobs while auditioning. He worked as a waiter, a script intern, even as a commercial actor in small roles, the typical grind of someone who believed that every no was just a step toward yes. He once told a story about nearly giving up. His mother encouraged him to hold out for just one more year, and that 1 year changed everything. In 2004, Krasinski landed the role that would make him a household name: Jim Halpert in The Office. Jim Halpert, the relatable icon. When The Office premiered in 2005, it wasn't an instant hit, but slowly, through word of mouth and online fandom, it grew into a cultural phenomenon. At the heart of that success was Krasinski's portrayal of Jim, the witty, kind-hearted salesman with a love for pranks. In 2008, he met Emily Blunt, the British actress known for her elegance, wit, and powerhouse performances. Their connection was instant and genuine. They married in 2010, and over the years, they've become one of Hollywood's most admired couples, not because of glamour, but because of their quiet partnership and mutual respect. Together, they've raised 2 daughters, and their creative chemistry culminated in one of modern cinema's most acclaimed horror films, A Quiet Place. 2018. A Quiet Place, reinventing modern horror. Krasinski didn't just star in A Quiet Place. He wrote, directed, and produced it alongside his wife, Emily Blunt. The film told the story of a family surviving in silence in a world hunted by creatures that attack its sound. It wasn't just a horror film, it was a love story, a story about parenting, sacrifice, and connection. Critics and audiences were stunned. Made on a modest budget, A Quiet Place grossed over $340 million worldwide, becoming a cultural phenomenon and revitalizing the horror genre through emotion rather than gore. The film's success proved that Krasinski wasn't just a sitcom actor. He was a filmmaker with vision. He later directed A Quiet Place Part 2, 2021, which was equally acclaimed and solidified his reputation as one of Hollywood's most thoughtful storytellers. Krasinski's evolution didn't stop with emotional storytelling. In 2018, he took on another challenge, reinventing the iconic CIA analyst Jack Ryan for Amazon Prime's action thriller series. Following in the footsteps of actors like Harrison Ford and Alec Baldwin, Krasinski brought a fresh dimension to the character, analytical, human, yet capable of extraordinary courage. The series was a hit. Audiences praised his performance for its balance of intelligence and moral conflict, portraying a hero not defined by violence, but by principle. In a media landscape saturated with muscle-bound superheroes, Krasinski's Jack Ryan stood out because he felt real, a patriot guided by empathy, not ego. The everyman philosopher, what makes Krasinski different? Part of John Krasinski's appeal lies in how he represents the modern good guy. In an age of cynicism and spectacle, he embodies sincerity, optimism, and heart, values that audiences crave more than ever. He's not just an actor, he's a storyteller who believes in hope. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Krasinski launched Some Good News, SGN, a YouTube series highlighting uplifting stories from around the world. In a time of fear and isolation, his show became a beacon of positivity, drawing millions of views and spreading comfort through authenticity. That's who he is, a creator who understands that entertainment isn't just about distraction. It's about connection. John Krasinski, the filmmaker, a storyteller with soul. As a filmmaker, Krasinski focuses on themes of family, empathy, and communication. His camera doesn't just observe, it listens. He once said, "The best stories aren't about what you say, they about what you done have to say." That philosophy echoes throughout A Quiet Place, where silence speaks louder than words. His approach to filmmaking is deeply humanistic. Whether it's exploring fear, love, or survival, his stories always circle back to one question: what does it mean to protect the people you love? Net worth, recognition, and humility. As of 2025, John Krasinski's net worth is estimated around $80 million, a testament to his success, not just as an actor, but as a writer, director, and producer. Yet, despite the fame, he remains grounded. He's often described as one of the most approachable stars in Hollywood, polite, self-deprecating, and grateful. In interviews, he credits his parents and wife for keeping him humble. He's quick to laugh at himself, to deflect praise, and to share credit. That humility has made him a role model, not just for aspiring actors, but for anyone striving to balance ambition with kindness. Impact on pop culture. Krasinski's influence stretches far beyond television and film. His portrayal of Jim Halpert inspired an entire generation's idea of the relatable romantic lead. His directorial work influenced modern suspense storytelling, replacing gore with emotional intelligence. And his presence as a modern husband and father in Hollywood, loving, loyal, and funny, has challenged outdated stereotypes about masculinity. He's the bridge between old Hollywood's charm and new Hollywood's conscience. John Krasinski isn't done yet. He's rumored to be involved in new directorial projects and collaborations with Emily Blunt, and fans continue to speculate about his potential entry into major franchises. But even if he never directed another blockbuster or starred in another action thriller, his legacy would remain intact as the man who reminded the world that empathy can be cinematic and sincerity can still shine in a world obsessed with irony. So, when we look back at October 20th, 1979, we're reminded that sometimes the people who make us laugh the hardest or cry the deepest start their journey in the most ordinary places. From a small-town kid in Massachusetts to a global filmmaker, John Krasinski's story is one of quiet perseverance, of believing that kindness and authenticity still matter in an industry often built on illusion. He's lived his career like the characters he portrays, honest, thoughtful, and deeply human. And that's why, decades from now, when audiences revisit The Office, A Quiet Place, or Jack Ryan, they won't just see an actor, they'll see a storyteller who made them feel something real. Because that's what John Krasinski has always been, not just a performer, but a reflection of who we all want to be. Ordinary people capable of extraordinary empathy. Number 10. Death of Oscar de la Renta, 2014. The passing of a fashion legend. On October 20th, 2014, the world lost one of its most celebrated and influential fashion designers, Oscar de la Renta. His death marked the end of an era in haute couture, yet his legacy continues to walk down red carpets, glide across runways, and live in the hearts of those who adored his timeless elegance. From dressing first ladies to Hollywood icons, Oscar de la Renta didn't just design clothes. He crafted confidence, grace, and the essence of glamour itself. The man behind the name. Born in the Dominican Republic in 1932, Oscar Aristides Renta grew up surrounded by tropical vibrance and artistic influence. The youngest of 7 children, he was raised in a middle-class family that valued culture and education. Initially, young Oscar dreamed of becoming a painter, studying art at the Academy of San Fernando in Madrid. But as fate would have it, the world of brushstrokes would soon transform into a world of silk, lace, and chiffon. While studying in Spain, Oscar began sketching fashion illustrations for newspapers and magazines to earn extra money. His talent caught the attention of Cristobal Balenciaga, Spain's most revered couturier at the time. Balenciaga saw potential in the young artist and took him under his wing, a mentorship that shaped Oscar's design philosophy forever. Balenciaga taught him precision, structure, and the importance of tailoring. But it wasn't until Oscar moved to Paris and joined Antonio Castillo at Lanvin that he truly refined his understanding of how fashion could merge art, personality, and social influence. New York, the birth of a global icon. By the early 1960s, Oscar de la Renta had set his sights on New York, the rising capital of American fashion. He worked briefly for Elizabeth Arden, creating pieces that carried the romance of European couture with the practicality of American style. In 1965, he launched his own label, Oscar de la Renta, and instantly became a sensation. His designs were known for their exquisite craftsmanship, feminine silhouettes, and floral-inspired elegance. Where others sought minimalism, Oscar embraced opulence. His gowns whispered sophistication, often shimmering with delicate embroidery, satin finishes, and flowing fabrics that captured light like poetry. By the 1970s and 1980s, he was dressing socialites, royalty, and first ladies, including Jacqueline Kennedy, Nancy Reagan, Hillary Clinton, and later Michelle Obama. Each of them, in their way, helped define the political and cultural aesthetics of their times, and Oscar was their silent yet powerful collaborator. The Oscar de la Renta woman Oscar once said, "Walk like you have 3 men walking behind you." That quote perfectly sums up his view on fashion, not as armor, but as expression. His clothes were made to make women feel seen, beautiful, and powerful. Unlike many designers of his era, Oscar didn't chase trends, he created an identity. His clients weren't just customers, they were muses. Whether it was a flowing evening gown or a sharply tailored suit, his pieces made women feel alive in their skin. He believed fashion should serve life, not the other way around. Every design carried warmth, generosity, and optimism, much like the man himself. Celebrity culture and red carpet royalty. When red carpet events became global spectacles in the 1990s and 2000s, Oscar de la Renta's designs were front and center. From Sarah Jessica Parker's dramatic gowns to Taylor Swift's ethereal ensembles, the Oscar label became synonymous with timeless elegance and cinematic glamour. He once dressed Amal Clooney for her wedding, an ensemble that drew international headlines and symbolized the passing of elegance from one generation to another. His work didn't just fit the moment, it elevated it. Every red carpet look was a statement of taste, discipline, and storytelling. A global legacy beyond the runway. Oscar de la Renta was not just a designer, he was a brand of humanity. His philanthropy extended far beyond fashion weeks and boutiques. He built schools and supported charities in his home country, the Dominican Republic, empowering children through education and the arts. He also launched Casa de Campo, a luxury resort that became a haven for the elite, while also providing jobs and development in his homeland. His pride in his Dominican roots was unwavering. Even though he lived between New York and Europe, Oscar often said, "My heart is always in the Caribbean." His warmth, generosity, and humility earned him admiration from colleagues and competitors alike. Designers such as Carolina Herrera, Ralph Lauren, and Tom Ford often referred to him not only as a mentor, but as a true gentleman of fashion, someone who elevated the entire industry simply by being part of it. Final years, an enduring spirit. In the early 2000s, Oscar was diagnosed with cancer, yet he continued working, showing collections with the same passion and energy as ever. He refused to let illness define his final years. Instead, he poured his creativity into his work. mentoring young designers and ensuring his brand would live beyond his lifetime. When he passed away on October 20th, 2014, at the age of 82, tributes flooded in from every corner of the world. Former First Lady Michelle Obama, Anna Wintour, Sarah Jessica Parker, and countless celebrities expressed their grief and gratitude for a man who made them, and millions of women, feel extraordinary. Fashion houses dimmed their lights, the industry paused. The world felt emptier without Oscar's smile, charm, and the rustle of his silk gowns echoing down the world's most glamorous halls. Oscar's influence on modern design. Even after his passing, the Oscar de la Renta brand continues to thrive, now led by creative directors who carry forward his vision. His influence can be seen across generations of designers who combine tradition with innovation, a balance he perfected long before it became fashionable. Runways still shimmer with echoes of his signature style, the fitted bodices, voluminous skirts, delicate embroidery, and unapologetic romance. But more than design techniques, he left behind a philosophy that fashion, at its best, celebrates life. His influence stretches into film, pop culture, and even political aesthetics. When someone appears effortlessly elegant, chances are they're channeling the spirit of Oscar de la Renta, the man who made fashion feel. Oscar de la Renta once said, "Fashion is about dressing according to what's fashionable. Style is more about being yourself." That's the essence of his work, not to transform people into someone else, but to magnify who they already were. He believed beauty was not just about perfection, but about presence. His clothes were crafted to capture emotion, joy, pride, confidence, and allure, the unspoken languages that make fashion an art form. Even today, students in fashion schools study his work to understand balance, proportion, and narrative in clothing. Every stitch, pleat, and fold told a story. Every gown was a celebration. A world draped in his legacy. When we remember Oscar de la Renta, we remember more than a man who dressed stars and presidents. We remember a visionary who believed in the power of elegance, not as luxury, but as expression. Every October 20th, fashion enthusiasts around the world take a quiet moment to honor the master tailor of dreams. His designs continue to inspire new generations, and his philosophy reminds us that true beauty lies not just in what we wear, but how we carry ourselves. Oscar de la Renta didn't just create fashion, he created moments, and in those moments, he made the world just a little more beautiful. Number 11, Patent of the Bullseye Code, 1949, the birth of the Barcode Revolution. On October 20th, 1949, two visionary minds, Norman Joseph Woodland and Bernard Silver, were granted a patent that quietly reshaped the modern world. Their invention, titled Classifying Apparatus and Method, introduced a circular symbol known as the Bullseye Code. Though it seemed simple at first glance, this idea became the ancestor of the barcode, a humble set of lines and patterns that would one day power global commerce, redefine supply chains, and forever change how the world buys, sells, ships, and tracks almost everything. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't even immediately practical. But like many great inventions, it began with a question, a spark of curiosity, and a deep understanding that the future could be automated. A classroom question that sparked a revolution. It all started at Drexel Institute of Technology, now Drexel University, in Philadelphia. Bernard Silver, a graduate student, overheard a local grocery store executive asking a professor if anyone could design a system to automatically read product information during checkout. The request was ahead of its time. Supermarkets were growing, but inventory management was painfully manual. Every price had to be typed in, every stock count written by hand. Mistakes were common. Time was wasted. Silver mentioned the idea to his friend, Norman Joseph Woodland, a mechanical engineer and fellow visionary. Woodland, fascinated by technology and inspired by Morse code, couldn't get the problem out of his head. So he began to experiment. The moment of inspiration. One day, sitting on a beach in Florida, Woodland absent-mindedly dragged his fingers through the sand. As he later recounted, he drew a series of dots and dashes, the Morse code symbols, and then elongated them until they formed lines. That was the eureka moment. He realized that information could be stored not as written numbers or symbols, but as patterns, something a machine could read using light. Woodland translated this concept into a visual system that used concentric circles, a bullseye pattern, so that it could be scanned from any direction. It was elegant, symmetrical, and far ahead of the available technology. By 1949, he and Silver had built a prototype system using a light bulb and photoelectric cell, the foundation of what would later become barcode scanning. That same year, they filed their patent application, and on October 20th, 1949, their Bullseye code officially became part of recorded history. The Bullseye code explained their design was a marvel of early digital thinking. Instead of the linear barcode we know today, Woodland and Silver's system used circular rings of varying widths and spacing. This circular design, like a target, ensured that the symbol could be scanned from any direction without worrying about alignment. At a time when computers were still experimental and lasers didn't exist, this idea was visionary. They even imagined a world where every product could be read by a machine, long before the term automation became a buzzword. Each product could carry its own unique code, which could be interpreted by photosensors and linked to a database containing details like price, stock level, and manufacturer. In 1949, that sounded like science fiction. A brilliant idea, but the world wasn't ready. Despite its brilliance, the technology of the late 1940s simply couldn't keep up. The hardware needed to scan and decode the bullseye pattern was expensive and unreliable. Computers weren't fast enough to process the data in real time, and the grocery industry wasn't yet prepared to make the leap. In short, the idea was too far ahead of its time. Woodland and Silver eventually sold their patent for just $15,000, a modest sum for something that would later become worth billions. Tragically, Silver passed away at a young age and never saw the impact of their work. Woodland, however, continued working in technology and eventually joined IBM, where his vision finally came to life. The rise of the modern barcode. In the early 1970s, with the rise of laser scanning and microprocessors, Woodland's old idea found its moment. A group of IBM engineers revisited his work, adapting the bullseye pattern into a linear barcode, a design that was easier to print and read with laser beams. In 1973, exactly 24 years after Woodland and Silver ES patent, the Universal Product Code, UPC, was introduced. It was a simple series of vertical bars and spaces, representing numbers that could be read instantly by scanners. A year later, on June 26, 1974, the first ever item scanned with a barcode was a pack of Wrigley A.S. Juicy Fruit Gum at a supermarket in Ohio. That tiny moment marked the dawn of a new age, one that would revolutionize retail, logistics, and global commerce. The hidden genius of Woodland and Silver. It's easy to take barcodes for granted today. They're everywhere, from cereal boxes to airplane tickets, from hospital wristbands to Amazon warehouses. But behind that tiny pattern lies the genius of two men who dared to think differently. Norman Woodland's mix of artistry and engineering created a system that combined simplicity with power. His work demonstrated the beauty of information design, the idea that something so small could contain so much meaning. Even decades later, Woodland remained humble. When he was awarded the National Medal of Technology and Innovation in 2011 by President Obama, he said, "I'm just happy people finally found a good use for my idea." That good use has since reshaped entire industries. The impact on everyday life. The true brilliance of the barcode lies not just in its design, but in its universality. Barcodes allowed companies to track inventory in real time, reduce errors, speed up transactions, and manage global logistics with pinpoint accuracy. They made modern supply chains possible. Without them, online shopping, global trade, and even modern healthcare would look completely different. Every time you scan a product at the checkout, you're using Woodland and Silver's legacy. Every shipment that reaches your doorstep is guided by their idea. Every retail system that balances stock owes its existence to that one patent from 1949. Even the QR codes we use today, those digital squares that store URLs and payment data, are direct descendants of the Bullseye code. The concept remains the same, turning visual patterns into data. a quiet legacy that changed everything. Unlike inventors who became household names, Woodland and Silver never sought fame. Their work didn't have the glamour of flight or the drama of space exploration, but it quietly became one of the most important innovations of the 20th century. Their patent outlived them both, a simple drawing of concentric rings that eventually evolved into one of the most universal symbols on Earth. Think about it. The barcode is on nearly every manufactured product, in every country, across every language. It's a global language of commerce, a bridge between human need and machine precision. In a way, it represents the beauty of human ingenuity. How curiosity, persistence, and a desire to solve everyday problems can lead to inventions that shape entire civilizations. From a beach in Florida to every checkout counter. The story of the Bullseye Code is the story of the unsung inventors, the dreamers who build the foundations upon which modern life stands. Woodland's simple sketch in the sand became a digital heartbeat of the global economy. Every beep of a scanner at checkout is, in essence, a tribute to that moment in 1949 when two young men believed machines could read patterns and that information could flow as easily as light. On October 20th, when we look back at the patent of the Bullseye Code, we're not just remembering a technical milestone, we're remembering a philosophy of innovation, one that whispers, every great idea begins with curiosity. Legacy beyond the code. Today, Norman Joseph Woodland and Bernard Silver's names may not appear in most history books, but their impact is everywhere. They taught the world that innovation doesn't always start with massive laboratories or government funding. Sometimes it starts with a question and a handful of sand. Their Bullseye patent from 1949 remains a symbol of quiet genius, proof that even the simplest shapes can revolutionize how the world works. So, the next time you scan a barcode, pause for a second. Behind that soft beep lies the story of two visionaries who looked at lines and circles and saw the future. Number 12. Birth of Thomas Bartholin, 1616, the man who mapped the hidden rivers of life. The year was 1616, a time when medicine was still caught between superstition and discovery. The human body was a mystery wrapped in myth. Diseases were blamed on bad air or curses, and doctors often relied on philosophy more than anatomy. But amid this confusion, a quiet revolution was beginning. A revolution of observation, dissection, and evidence. And into this world was born Thomas Bartholin on October 20th, 1616, in Copenhagen, Denmark. A man whose curiosity about the inner workings of the human body would eventually lead him to one of the most profound discoveries in medical history, the human lymphatic system. His life story is one of intellect, curiosity, and courage. It is the tale of a man who dared to look beneath the skin, literally, to reveal the hidden rivers that cleanse, nourish, and defend the human body. The making of a Renaissance mind. Thomas Bartholin was born into a family that seemed destined to advance human knowledge. His father, Caspar Bartholin the Elder, was already a renowned theologian and anatomist who had written a widely respected medical textbook. Growing up in such an environment meant that Thomas was surrounded by books, debates, and scientific instruments from an early age. His family home wasn't just a household, it was a miniature university. Young Thomas quickly showed an exceptional intellect. He studied philosophy and medicine at the University of Copenhagen and later at several European institutions, including Leiden and Paris, the epicenters of medical thought in the 17th century. But what set him apart wasn't just his knowledge, it was his curiosity. Europe in the age of discovery, of maps, stars, and bodies. The early 1600s were an age of exploration, both across the oceans and within the human form. Galileo had turned his telescope toward the heavens. Vesalius, decades earlier, had mapped the human skeleton and muscles with unprecedented precision. Yet, there were still secrets inside the body that no one could explain. How did fluids move? Where did swelling come from? What was the strange, clear liquid that sometimes appeared when tissues were cut open during dissection? Some believed it was a byproduct of blood. Others thought it was simply moisture. But Bartholin wasn't convinced. The great discovery, revealing the lymphatic system. In 1652, Thomas Bartholin published Vasa Lymphatica, a work that changed the course of medical science. In it, he described the existence of a new system of vessels that ran parallel to the blood circulation, what we now call the lymphatic system. These delicate, nearly invisible vessels carried a clear fluid, lymph, that played a vital role in maintaining health. Bartholin recognized that these vessels collected fluid from tissues and returned it to the bloodstream, helping cleanse the body of waste and maintain internal balance. This was revolutionary. Imagine being a 17th century physician, peering through dim candlelight at a dissected body, tracing tiny transparent vessels with crude instruments. No microscopes, no antiseptic, no proper lighting. Yet Bartholin managed to see what no one else had clearly documented. He called this system Vasa Lymphatica, vessels of lymph. His work provided the missing link between blood circulation, discovered by William Harvey in 1628, and the body's ability to fight disease. For the first time, the human body was seen as a network of two great rivers, one carrying life through blood, and the other maintaining purity and defense through lymph. Science, rivalry, and recognition. But as with many great discoveries, controversy followed. Almost simultaneously, Olaus Rudbeck, a Swedish scientist, claimed he had discovered the lymphatic system independently. The two men exchanged sharp words through published papers, a scientific rivalry that echoed across Europe. Bartholin's findings, however, were better documented and more widely accepted, ensuring his place in history as the man who first clearly described the system in humans. In truth, both men contributed to our understanding, but it was Bartholin who gave the lymphatic system its rightful place in the medical canon. His meticulous illustrations and detailed Latin descriptions became the foundation of modern anatomy textbooks. More than a physician, the scholar of many worlds. Thomas Bartholin was not merely a medical researcher, he was a true Renaissance scholar. He wrote extensively on natural philosophy, theology, and literature, bridging the gap between science and the humanities. He served as a professor of medicine at the University of Copenhagen, where he inspired generations of students to look deeper, not just at bodies, but at the nature of life itself. He was also a royal physician, serving the Danish king, and his advice was sought throughout Europe. Yet despite his prestige, Bartholin remained humble, dedicated to observation rather than fame. His personal motto could have been, "Truth lies beneath the surface." A time of fire and faith. Bartholin's Denmark in the 1600s was not the modern peaceful nation we know today. It was an era of wars, plagues, and superstition. In 1728, long after Bartholin's death, Copenhagen suffered a devastating fire that destroyed many of his manuscripts and anatomical specimens. But by then, his work had already spread far beyond Denmark's borders, translated and copied in universities across Europe. His discoveries survived the flames, immortal in ink and memory. And perhaps what's most striking about Bartholin's era is how faith and science coexisted. He was deeply religious, seeing his medical research not as defiance of God, but as a way to understand divine design. To him, exploring anatomy was not an act of rebellion. It was an act of worship. In one of his writings, he reflected, "The works of the Creator are most visible in the vessels unseen." That poetic insight summed up his worldview. That truth, even divine truth, could be found in the hidden details of the natural world. Legacy in every pulse and drop. Today, every student of medicine learns about the lymphatic system, the invisible guardian that filters infections, absorbs fats, and circulates immune cells. It's critical in fighting cancer, infections, and autoimmune diseases. Without Bartholin's discovery, our understanding of immunity and inflammation would have been delayed by centuries. In hospitals around the world, modern technologies like MRI lymphography and immunotherapy trace their lineage back to Bartholin's candlelit dissections. His curiosity created the blueprint for studying how the body protects itself. Every heartbeat, every breath, every drop of lymph that flows through your veins carries his legacy. A family of thinkers, the House of Bartholin. The Bartholin family didn't just give science one genius, they gave it an entire dynasty. His father, Caspar Bartholin the Elder, was one of the first anatomists to describe several parts of the body, and his son, Caspar Bartholin the Younger, continued the family tradition with his own medical and theological writings. In total, 6 generations of Bartholins contributed to medicine, philosophy, or theology, an intellectual lineage almost unmatched in Europe's history. Their collective work transformed Denmark into a center of learning, influencing the growth of the University of Copenhagen and inspiring generations of Scandinavian scientists. Why Thomas Bartholin still matters. In an age where most discoveries are made by teams of hundreds, Bartholin's story reminds us that sometimes one person's curiosity can reveal the unseen architecture of life itself. He represents the bridge between faith and reason, between the mystical and the measurable. He showed that science is not about conquering nature, it's about understanding it. And understanding for him was a sacred act. The lymphatic system might not have the glamour of the heart or the brain, but it's the quiet hero of human biology, much like its discoverer. The hidden rivers within us. Imagine the poetic symmetry of it. Every human body carries within it a silent tribute to Thomas Bartholin. Streams of clear fluid flowing through a hidden network, protecting and balancing life. In that sense, Bartholin didn't just discover a system. He revealed a metaphor for existence itself, that what sustains us is often invisible, quietly doing its work beneath the surface. His discovery taught humanity something profound, that life is not sustained by what we see, but by what we don't. Number 13, birth of James Chadwick, 1891. The brilliant mind who discovered the neutron, a quiet genius who changed physics forever. If you've ever wondered how scientists truly unlocked the mysteries of the atom, how we went from simple chemistry to understanding nuclear power, atomic energy, and the structure of everything that exists, then the name James Chadwick deserves your attention. Born on October 20th, 1891, in Bollington, Cheshire, England, Chadwick's story isn't just a tale of science, it's the story of human curiosity, patience, and the kind of intellect that quietly reshapes the course of history. Early life, a humble beginning. James Chadwick wasn't born into wealth or privilege. His father worked as a cotton spinner, a respectable but modest profession, and his mother took care of the home. Chadwick was a shy child, introspective and curious, always asking questions about how things worked. He wasn't loud or flamboyant. Rather, he was the kind of student who'd stay up late with a candle, puzzling over numbers or reading any science book he could find. His natural gift for mathematics and physics became obvious early on, and he earned a scholarship to attend the University of Manchester. There, fate introduced him to one of the most brilliant physicists of the time, Ernest Rutherford, often called the father of nuclear physics. This mentorship would shape Chadwick's destiny in ways no one could have imagined. Learning under Rutherford, the foundation of genius. Working under Rutherford was like standing beside a live wire of intellect and energy. The lab at Manchester was buzzing with new discoveries. Rutherford had just proposed the idea of the atomic nucleus, and young scientists were exploring how particles interacted at the smallest levels of matter. Chadwick's precision and calm manner made him a perfect fit for this type of work. He wasn't impulsive, he was methodical, patient, and intensely focused. Rutherford trusted him deeply, even calling him one of the most reliable experimental physicists he'd ever trained. The shadow of war. Science interrupted. When World War I broke out, Chadwick's career took an unexpected turn. While working in Germany as a research fellow, he was arrested as an enemy alien and spent nearly the entire war interned in a German camp. It was a grim experience, filled with scarcity, fear, and uncertainty. Yet, even in captivity, Chadwick's scientific mind refused to shut down. He improvised experiments using whatever materials he could find, wire, scraps of metal, bits of wood, to continue testing scientific ideas. It's almost poetic to think that, even behind barbed wire, his curiosity never faded. That quiet resilience would later help him uncover one of the most profound discoveries in physics. Return to science, the discovery that changed everything. After the war, Chadwick returned to England and resumed his research with Rutherford, now at Cambridge University. By the late 1920s, physicists were puzzled by something strange. Atoms didn't seem to make sense mathematically. The protons in the nucleus accounted for only part of the atomic mass, yet there was no charge to explain the rest. Some scientists suspected that there might be another hidden particle inside the nucleus, something neutral, invisible, and undetected. In 1932, Chadwick decided to solve that mystery once and for all. Working with a small team and limited resources, he fired alpha particles, helium nuclei, at beryllium and carefully measured the results. What he found astonished the world. The collision emitted a new kind of radiation that wasn't heat-charged like a proton or an electron. It was neutral. He had discovered the neutron. This was more than just another particle. It was the missing key to the structure of matter. It explained how atoms held together and paved the way for both nuclear energy and, unfortunately, nuclear weapons. The impact, from theory to technology. The discovery of the neutron was monumental. Without neutrons, there would be no understanding of isotopes, no nuclear reactors, no atomic bombs, and no MRI scanners. Every field of modern physics, from particle science to quantum mechanics, owes something to Chadwick's work. For his groundbreaking discovery, James Chadwick was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1935. His acceptance speech was characteristically humble. He didn't boast or dramatize the achievement. Instead, he spoke about the continued curiosity of man and the idea that each discovery opens more questions than it answers. The Manhattan Project, a moral dilemma. When World War II erupted, Chadwick found himself pulled into another difficult chapter of history. His expertise in atomic physics made him a key figure in the Manhattan Project, the secret Allied program to develop the first atomic bomb. It wasn't an easy decision for him. By all accounts, Chadwick was deeply moral and uncomfortable with the idea of using science to destroy. Yet, he understood the stakes. Nazi Germany was racing to create its own nuclear weapon, and the Allies couldn't afford to fall behind. He worked with quiet determination, contributing to the understanding of nuclear chain reactions and helping guide experimental approaches that made the atomic bomb possible. After the war, however, he withdrew from the spotlight and devoted much of his later life to teaching and ethical reflection on science's role in society. Life after the war, the reluctant hero. Chadwick's post-war years were marked by introspection. He became a professor at the University of Liverpool and worked to rebuild the academic world torn apart by conflict. Those who studied under him described him as gentle, modest, and exacting, a man who didn't seek fame but demanded precision and honesty in science. He was knighted in 1945, becoming Sir James Chadwick. But even then, he remained the same quiet man who preferred his laboratory bench to public ceremonies. Legacy, a name carved in every physics book. Today, James Chadwick's name might not be as instantly recognizable as Einstein or Rutherford, but his impact runs deep. Every student who studies nuclear physics learns about the neutron. Every reactor that generates power owes its function to his discovery, and every theoretical model of the atom stands on his shoulders. He passed away in Cambridge, England in 1974, leaving behind not just scientific knowledge, but an enduring lesson in humility and perseverance. Why people love his story. There's something profoundly human about James Chadwick's story. He wasn't flamboyant or famous in his time. He wasn't a public speaker or a celebrity scientist. Instead, he was a reminder that quiet minds can change the world. His discovery reshaped modern science, yet he never let it change his character. He endured war, imprisonment, and the moral weight of nuclear power, all while staying committed to truth and curiosity. That's why, even decades later, readers, scientists, and students love learning about him. His life is a testament to how one mind, working patiently and sincerely, can redefine humanity's understanding of the universe. James Chadwick's birthday on October 20th, 1891, marks not just the birth of a man, but the dawn of a new scientific age. His discovery of the neutron bridged the gap between theory and reality, transforming the invisible world of atoms into something we could understand, and ultimately harness. He showed that discovery isn't always about explosions of inspiration or fame. Sometimes, It's about quiet persistence, careful measurement, and the courage to ask the simplest question of all: what if? That's why his name continues to echo in every lab, every classroom, and every history of science written since. And there you have it. October 20th, a date stitched together with some of the most remarkable chapters in human history. From the grand opening of the Sydney Opera House that redefined architecture, to the birth of icons like Kamala Harris, Snoop Dogg, and Mickey Mantle, today truly reminds us how one date can hold countless stories, dreams, and destinies. We traveled through time, from the roaring applause of Sydney Harbor in 1973 to the heat of World War II, where General Douglas MacArthur strode back onto Philippine shores, fulfilling his legendary promise, "I shall return." We remembered Oscar de la Renta, the man whose designs made the world his runway, and James Chadwick, the humble genius who gave the world the neutron, the invisible cornerstone of modern science. And let us not forget the RMS Olympic, the majestic sister ship of the Titanic, a triumph of engineering and ambition, symbolizing humanity's eternal desire to go beyond limits. Each of these stories, whether of invention, courage, or creativity, is a reflection of us, our potential to dream, to build, to lead, and to inspire. October 20th isn't just a date on the calendar, it's a time capsule of brilliance, heartbreak, and wonder. Think about it. On one single day, in different corners of the world, artists, leaders, scientists, and visionaries were born, ships were launched, and promises were kept. Some moments made headlines. Others quietly shaped the world we live in today. But together they remind us of one truth: every date holds a story worth telling. So as we wrap up our journey through the 20th of October, let's take a moment to celebrate the people who changed the world, the risk-takers, the thinkers, the creators, and the dreamers. Whether it's Snoop Dogg dropping beats that defined a generation or Kamala Harris breaking through glass ceilings in politics, they all share one thing in common: they left the world a little more inspired than they found it. History, after all, isn't just something written in books. It's alive in us. Every invention, every discovery, every song, and every act of courage continues to echo through time, shaping the way we live, work, and dream today. If this journey through October 20th has fascinated you, you'll definitely want to travel one day back and one day forward with us. Don't miss our October 19th episode, where we uncover another thrilling lineup of events, from revolutionary discoveries to untold stories that shook the world. And trust us, October 21st brings even more surprises, with moments that blend science, celebrity, and destiny in the most unexpected ways. Each day in history is like opening a different chapter of humanity's grand story. Sometimes joyful, sometimes tragic, but always unforgettable. So hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join us every day as we explore the incredible things that happened on this very day in history. Because who knows? Maybe one day your story will be part of it too. Thanks for watching, stay curious, and we'll see you tomorrow, same time, same place, for October 21st. The day history continued to write itself. This day in history, October 20th, where every moment tells a story, and every story brings the past to life.